Xbox is making massive cuts to the org. Let's dive into the details. Xbox has announced today that they are making some pretty significant changes to the organization. Microsoft itself said they are cutting 9,000 people from the org chart, and now that's not all exactly aligned to Xbox. It does feel like Xbox is getting the brunt of those cuts. Sales and a few other orgs have been impacted as well. However, this is really changing the game, quite literally, no pun intended, to what is happening within Xbox. And Phil Spencer sent out a letter, all source links will be down in the description, talking about all of these changes where he talks. And so I'm not going to read every single word of this. You can pause the video here if you want to read everything that he has said. But he says they must make changes now for the continued success in the future and years. And a key part of the strategy is the discipline to prioritize the strongest opportunities. We will protect what is thriving and concentrate efforts on areas with the greatest potential while delivering on the expectations the company has for our business. This focused approach means that we can deliver exceptional games and exceptional experiences, I should say, for players for generations to come. And so they're reprioritizing, they're making a lot of changes, and he talks about the momentum and HR are going to be helpful and everything else. But it's all just wrapped up in a lawyery corporate speak saying, like, look, we're making some pretty deep cuts across the org, and let's start picking these apart, because the details, as is tradition when things happen like this, are still coming together. But I want to point out a couple things in that long letter where he says, we will protect what is thriving and concentrate effort on areas with the greatest potential while delivering on the expectations of the company. I have been saying for a while now, and people keep roasting me for this, like saying Xbox doesn't have to pay back the money, all the investments and everything. Like, Phil quite literally says that this is a business decision because of the expectations that management, meaning senior leadership and the board of directors, is placing upon Xbox to really realign the business. Other crucially parts of this statement, it says we will focus on the areas with greatest potential. We went through an era that maybe looked fondly upon for games that actually shipped, which we'll talk about here in a second, where Xbox was taking some really diverse risks, right? We've seen some unique games come out. We've seen creative storytelling that doesn't really vibe and land in traditional markets where it's like the Call of Duties, the Fortnites, the Battle Royales. I don't want to say live services because Sony has proven that, hey, just because you launch a live service, and EA for that matter, it doesn't always work out. However, there's been some serious risk-taking on the side of Xbox, and it feels like that is coming to an end. They are recalibrating their portfolio. They are slashing where they're looking at games that either A, just can't get done, or they're not going to make a lot of sense for broad availability and broad appeal when they hit the market. These niche games with unique art styles, I suspect, are going to be the losers potentially through some of these changes. Now, that doesn't mean it's universally that Microsoft is moving away from it, but you got to look at this from what Xbox is quite literally saying. You cannot ignore that they're focusing on the things that actually make money. They're not going to invest in things that are not likely to make money, and they're recalibrating how they do these investments. We've already seen a lot of movements across the industry, and now Microsoft/Xbox is coming back around to a lot of this. So the first big casualty that we're hearing about is Everwild. Now, Everwild has been around for a while, like several years. So when I was saying previously, like some games just can't get out the door, it feels like Everwild is one that falls into this. Now, Jason is pointing out that, like, look, people are they're learning about this on the fly, but we're still learning about how these changes are going to impact everything. But it does sound like Everwild is not going to be shipping. Here's the thing that is a little befuddling. It sounds like some of these changes are more recent than, like, they've been planned for a long time, because not long ago Phil Spencer was on the Xbox Era podcast and he's had good things to say about Everwild. Now, granted, I don't expect him to go on there and say, like, hey, yeah, we're thinking about cutting them, like in a podcast with a third party, with a media partner or something like that. But like, he talks pretty fondly about giving people time, giving people space, and letting the creative idea and juices flow. And like, these are the things that need to happen for good game creation and storytelling. And it sounds like Everwild just can't get it together. I think what we're seeing here is Microsoft obviously pulling the financial reins back and be like, look, you guys can make awesome, great games, but you're going to do it on our deadline. And we're not just going to keep cutting checks until you feel like you can get this out the door. We don't know the whole story of Everwild. I suspect that there has been a lot going on and a lot of changes and a lot of shift in direction and changes of, I don't quite know. And like, it just feels like they couldn't get it done. And so Xbox is just cutting their loss with it at the end of the day. That is truly just what it seems like, even though they were recently not all that concerned with it. Other things, ZeniMax Online Studios, who also makes Elder Scrolls Online, has a project that was called Blackbird that has been, appears to be canceled. Again, if you look at the dates on here, since 2018. Now, granted, just because it says since 2018, that might have been like the initial pitch. Like, it takes time to get people, a process, a flow, whatever. However, let's say it took them a year. Like, we're in 2025 at this point. I had to look at the calendar because I would keep thinking it's 24 still, even though the year's halfway done. But that doesn't matter. Like, if you can't get the game out, then what's the point of continuous funding? And so at some point, it might just make more sense to do the write down or the write off of the asset, because like the game's going to come out and it's going to take forever, and the financial expectations will be so high that they will be impossible to meet. I think Halo Infinite was a little bit of a canary in a coal mine, where that was hundreds of millions of dollars in the hole, and then they just couldn't get it out, and then they couldn't get it in a way that made a lot of sense, that made people happy, because they were too scattershot across everything else. And so, we will see here. But there's a lot changing still ongoing that we don't know about. First off, Xbox, and I understand why they didn't do this. Like, people are saying, well, why didn't Xbox just put up a blog post that says these games are being cut, these things are happening, and this is the way we're doing it? They still might do that. You have to understand the sensitivity of this, of the time zones and everything else. So if they put up a blog post that says, look, we're closing X studio or X game, there's people in various time zones that may not have had the chance to talk to HR, or candidly probably check their email and get that notification that, hey, this thing is being terminated. So they can't do that until the whole process has been going on. Now, the process, based on what people are posting on Twitter and X and Blind and everywhere else, sounds like it's chaotic. That some people aren't even knowing that games are canceled, like Everwild, and they're just realizing that their communication tools are being shut off, and they have no way to understand, like, if they were impacted. And so it's like, well, if you can't log into Slack or Teams, more than likely were. But however, that's not how the process is supposed to work. You should have gotten a notification, and then all these things happen. So yeah, when you're eliminating 9,000 roles, it's not easy, and there's going to be chaos, and that is the reality. I think it's worth pointing out, like, Xbox has entered into a new phase right now. I don't want to say that hardware has been cut. So people are going to interpret this and say Xbox is getting out of the console business. That's been the narrative for like the last week or so, weirdly, which shouldn't have been a thing. It doesn't sound like the Xbox hardware team was hit too much, at least from the early onset of what we're hearing. So it looks like that is still progressing. It looks like they're just taking the axe to games that just can't get done or no longer make sense. I'm sure that they were trying to slim up the budgets here and try to get games out the door and profitable before they continue that investment. Like, everybody, including Microsoft, obviously wants more Call of Duties, more Minecrafts, potentially even more Sea of Thieves, even though there might be some turmoil there. But that is the goal, is to create titles that they can continue to invest in, that will continue to generate returns, rather than taking swings at the bat, hoping to hit a home run with a random, shouldn't say random, but with a new IP, because launching new IP is it's not tiresome, it's hard. It makes you tired, is what I was trying to say, to get all the things done, to build up, and you need time, and you need everything else, because a new IP comes out, it's not going to have a legion of fans. You need to be, the series has to be cultivated over time. To really build up that base so that it can become the money-generating machine that Microsoft and Xbox and everybody else so desperately wants. The other thing, too, Perfect Dark, we're not sure what's happening there yet. That title may not be coming out either. Now, Perfect Dark's an interesting one to not potentially see the light of day, primarily because it's a shooter, right? I don't know if it's necessarily first person, but either first person or third person shooters, those style of games, and I just kicked a light underneath my desk on accident. Those types of games typically do better than, say, your random, massive online multiplayer sort of like thing, because those are so deep and lore rich and everything else, and you got to really get into them. Whereas a first person shooter or third person, you just like run around, shoot people, and they're typically fun. So we will see. There's so much going on here that it's the literal fog of war sort of mentality as we try to understand what the new direction for Xbox is going to be. Hopefully they can, and hopefully and candidly, they just come out and actually tell us like what the new direction is, what the focus is going to be. But Microsoft, specifically Xbox, has lacked a ton of transparency. We don't know how many Game Pass subscribers there. We'll never know how many consoles are sold unless something leaks. And so I'm not expecting them to come out and deliberately say what's going on, but they already said the new Halo title will be talked about about here in the fall, right? It was at Gamescom, they said they're going to talk about something like that. So they're focusing in on certain brands and studios and titles. We'd love to know more about that, and hopefully they give us those details. But as of right now, we're still learning about what games are not actually going to make it to the finish line and everything else. So I wanted to get this up and get this out, and there'll be more than likely a video tomorrow once we have a better digestion of what has actually occurred today. But as always, my friends, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because on the BS on this channel is me.